Can you hear me at the back? Okay, thank you. So I'm intentionally skipping a PowerPoint. I want to talk to you frankly about the promise of AI in such large country like India. I also want to discuss with you the challenges, really, which are not even just AI related, right? To popularize in any context, any technology, the cultural aspects become really important, so I want to discuss that. I also want to talk about the flip, using AI to popularize even basic education, not just educating people about AI. So I dabble in several emerging technologies, and something which is a sin in corporate sector is to tell entire truth. Even that's something of a case even in research, but I'll do that because at least that's what I grew up sort of learning. So I started out with a very different background. So one thing I sort of say to all my colleagues and even students in academia and colleagues who are with me in different startups, if I can be devising new AI technology, not just using existing AI libraries, anyone can. So in my bachelor's, I was a microbiologist. I moved on to do molecular biology at a place called NCBS in Bangalore, which was a TIFR center, and then went to UT Austin because I said, okay, behavior molecular biology is good, but I want to understand brain functioning, and started recording currents. That took me to actually doing basic mathematics. So ended up collaborating with NYU, so that you can think how masochistic I am, had a dual component in my PhD, went towards that direction, and that led me to appreciate the beauty of patterns, which I was doing as an artist from childhood anyway. So I have come to AI from a very different perspective and had a calling of what to do for society, and that's why I moved to drug discovery, and in my second postdoc I realized that I can't do without AI if I really want to revolutionize this thing. So I ended up doing AI, but I'll be very brutally honest with you that I come up with things at a conceptual level. Implementation is by and large done by my various colleagues and students. So everyone, at least the way I work, I like to talk of my strengths and weaknesses openly, the way I'll even talk about education. Let's talk about what AI entails in future. AI is going to be entwined, not an addition. AI is going to be entwined. It's going to be inseparable from all walks of our lives, even personal sphere. Your health, your education, your professional life. Not just that, even your values, right? Your mores, morals, your vision of society, right? Your expectation of future. AI is going to be entwined in everything. The expectation is that, and to meet that expectation, obviously we have to work hard. The expectation is that towards that state, which is not very far away, we are at the beginning, we are just at the sort of edges or the beginning of stairs of that AI revolution, this AI would be with a very human face. So you want the flesh and the bones of both AI and every emerging technology and all things that we hold dear as humans, traditionally for our millennia of evolution, for not just that, for even millions of years of evolution, but you want the face to be very human. So the skin of whatever the revolution is still has to have a human face, right? So for that, it is very important that this revolution is all-encompassing. I'd also like to see, because I was going around and seeing some of the things, I came just a few hours back, so I haven't seen all the stalls. So one of the things that sort of pinched, I would even say, that at some level it's portrayed as a race, right? Or as a march of artificial intelligence. Certainly, every technology so far has had its own haves and have-nots. But this revolution need not be the same. So the way I like to see it as not a march, not a race, even though I myself use that terminology, I like to nudge some of my students that you're sort of lagging behind in the race. So we all have some competitive spirit. So I'll be the first one to say I'm guilty of it. But the way I like to envision it, it is more of a revolution. It's more of even a party. The problem is that most people are not invited to this party, right? Most people are outsiders. When I say most, I just don't mean India with its 1.2 billion population, where we have 1/7 of the world's population here, If we think of broader India culturally as Indian subcontinent, we have 2/7 of the world's population living in this subcontinent alone, right? And culturally, educationally, we are facing broadly same problems, however much we may hate each other at times of war or at times of even cricket matches, right? But by and large, whether we are talking from Afghanistan to even Myanmar, we are culturally talking of the similar spectrum and similar problems. So you have 2/7 of the world's humanity here itself, and you start thinking of developing countries, it's even a bigger portion. You start asking this question about Africa, well, you're pretty much covering everything. Now you may say, okay, so you're talking of developing world. I'm not even just talking of developing world. Let's even ask, is every citizen of US or Canada a AI have instead of in the have-not category? Let's even take this question to its logical extreme. Let's go to Silicon Valley. Think of somebody, let's just say 5, 6 years older than me, mid-40s. Aren't they afraid that they might become redundant soon, even if they're working in AI sector, right? So any revolution which is all-encompassing, right? Whether it be right from fire to even steam engine to computers, and then now we have AI, is going to create a lot of opportunity and crisis. So the way I see my life's mission is that can I offer this ticket to the party to as many people? And it's not just through education. There are 3 factors to it, right? If we have to bring everyone on board, whether it's somebody in America, a corporate employee with deep pockets who can pay you as an, if you're thinking from entrepreneur perspective, for reskilling, right? Whether you're thinking of a kid in class 2nd in a Bhil tribe area of India, can you offer them that, right? So your spectrum of people who you should be concerned about, whether you're staying in India or in US, something that I have done in my life. And in fact, for the sake of clarification, I'll even say that in a couple of years, I'm actually heading back to North America, doing the same what I do now, academia as well as entrepreneurship in West Coast. But the point is, the whole world is your playground. So I hope this is the largest meeting of AI, emerging technology in India, but I hope to even see them in US in a few years, right? So the world is your playground, but the questions remain same. If you want to extend this revolution to everyone, there are 3 things. First one, which I'll not talk a lot about, is essentially the danger, whether it's about your data privacy, whether it's weaponization, which is bound to happen, whether you like it or not, right? Whether it's the issue of surveillance, whether it's even issue of self-driving cars, a simple ethical question, right? That if your car is about to hit 2 people versus 1, who would you want the car to hit, right? Do you want to add even a case of child? Do you want to even add a simple thing? Because that's where human nature comes in. Ethics is very easy when you're dealing with somebody else's family or somebody else, right? Because you say, more should be saved. But if I'm a customer, I'll only buy a car, I'll say even if 10 die, save me if I'm sitting in the car, right? Where is ethics, right? Ethics goes down the drain. So end of the day, a lot of questions of AI-related ethics, and I'm not trying to sort of mock people who are working on AI ethics. In fact, if you Google my name, you'll realize that I have myself penned around a dozen articles. And with Hesi, a good friend who writes for Forbes and all, and Ramesh, I'm actually penning a book on ethics and emerging technology. So the new ethical questions. But by and large, the ethical issues of this revolution are the same which have been there since the time of classics, from the time of Greeks and Romans, from the time of even Indian saints and thinkers, right? So ethics hasn't changed because society is same. We are heading to Star Age in a caveman's DNA, right? The DNA is still the same, our concerns are still the same, our greed is still the same, and not just our greed, right? Our benevolence is still the same. So there is that issue which becomes a whole different talk, which I'm not talking about, but let us talk of other 2 things. Most people like to discuss education and entrepreneurship differently. If you want to empower people, you can't do either of them alone. I had earlier thought, coming from an interesting family, which both spread out across. If I look at all my relatives, some are even left-leaning, some are right-leaning. I used to think, change the society, change the government, and I myself was victim of several interesting things. After years of beating, I think you only learn from University of Hard Knocks the best way, not necessarily top universities in the US. I learned the way to change society is to create better products to teach more people. Otherwise, you have to play the same game as there is of any political system, be it in US or India. So I have kind of given up on that, but I have not necessarily given up on trying to change the world. But even when I'm thinking of trying to change the world, I would say something. You don't have to agree with me. You can be somebody like my father who suddenly starts ignoring the conversation as soon as you put the word profit in it. But the way I think about things is you have to put, or at least I put, the word profit in whatever I'm thinking. So even if the technology that I'm working on, if it is for masses, I'm not going to give it for free. So that's my personal take on things. You can have a different take on things. So the bottom line has to be there. The bottom line need not be great, but everything has to be self-sustaining. So whatever I'm preaching is at least what I'm doing. Some of it very successfully, some of it not so successfully, and I'm very honest about where I'm struggling. And I'd like to discuss with you, not just in question and answer session, even tomorrow, all the time that I'm here. Would most encourage people who are sort of beginning their careers in AI technology to talk about it. Let's talk of a few things of entrepreneurship, because I'm not here to promote around 11 startups that I'm part of and one big push that I'm starting immediately, because there is enough scope for me to reach out individually to people who are investors, who are collaborators. If some of you turn out to be in either of the two categories, or even potential co-founders, I'm sure I'll find you, I'm sure you'll find me. So I'll just give a very fast breeze. I'll give you one crazy example of what AI can do, just to give you a picture, and I'll give you a very low-tech example also. So I'll give you the most high-tech example. So imagine if you have epilepsy. Now you may say, okay, most people don't. You're wrong. If you count in silent epilepsy, right, where you think the kid is just inattentive, not everyone who's having seizure lying on the ground, but if the kid is inattentive, just blanking out, that's silent epilepsy. It's basically, if you think of what is epilepsy, if I break it down to people who are from non-biological field, it's synchronization, heavy synchronization of neurons, especially in temporal lobe, right? So now, 5% of the global population, at least the data we have from North America and from Western Europe, 5% population has it. Now, if you can tell those people half an hour or 8 hours in advance, right, how much life you can change of theirs, if they can take medicine only then. Now, I'll take you a little bit through the technology. The challenge was the public data available is only through Boston Children's Hospital and few other places. Instead of where India can come in handy, you can have around 200,000 patients. Data is simply not digitized, right? You reach out to hospitals, help them digitize it, they're willing to give you data, free of cost, right? So you're solving multi-million-dollar proposition in less than $1 million by getting the data. Because as I'm sure, even though I didn't attend any of the talks so far, whichever AI conference I go to, everyone teaches you this mantra. AI is easy. I don't fully agree with it, because I'll come to that in a moment. Everyone says AI is easy, data is the real gold, right? Because you have all the libraries you want to use, you can get any convolutional neural network you want, you can pull any generic adversarial neural network you want. It's really the key is data, right? So that's what everyone preaches. I beg to differ slightly with it, and I'll come to that also in a moment. But data is the key, right? So countries like India, you can actually get quite a lot of data, but once you get data, what is your challenge? Let's go as if you were part of the same team trying to solve this, how to make the product, right? Now you get this data, but that is coming from 64 channels. Nobody would want to walk around with 64 electrodes on their head going on with their daily lives, right? So you want to change it to one small innocuous electrode hiding under here, right? So nobody can see, just like small hearing aid. That is what you want to have. Second thing, predicting past is useless. You can publish papers in Nature and Science. I would love to do that. I like to publish in high-impact journals, but by doing prediction of past, but for a patient it's useless, so it has to be online. How would you do it? The way to do it online has to be a cell phone device kind of thing, right? A wearable. Better even still an app in your cell phone, right? Something that is not connected to cloud all the time. So at least should have minimal functionality even when you get out of your Wi-Fi range, right? When you get out of your mobile network range. So something which can get you relief. How would you implement it? If you're thinking of seizures, right? It's like stock market crash. AI does very poorly in predicting stock market crash. In some extreme cases, some of the youngsters may not even be familiar with classical approach of statistics where you're thinking of arc, garc, erima, right? Regression-based tools might sound French and Latin to youngsters, but not to people closer to my age who have grown up on statistics, and then the joke goes, right? Statisticians with the Mac became data scientists. So who grew up on statistics and then became sort of data scientists. So even that does better. So what is an approach to solving this problem? The way to solve this problem is to create an ensemble, right? A good ensemble. But then, which thing to take? Just take an average? Or, instead of taking an average, how about using a decision tree? And instead of using a deterministic decision tree all the time, how about using a sort of AI which is sort of helping with your meta decision, right? And pull it in the most simplistic terms, that what are the key factors where you have to use simple statistics. So I always like to say the future is hybrid. Future is not always artificial intelligence. Don't forget hard-coded rather than soft mathematics, something that none of my students really appreciate until I show them an actual product where it works better, right? So future is always hybrid. I know this is not a common message. It's something I like to repeat often because nobody is saying that as of now. I'm sure once the hype is over, 5 years down the line, you'll come and tell me you were right. But anyway, so now, if you can analyze it, what will be the next thing, right? Some of you, maybe one or two of you, might have had some biology background. If not, I'll tell you one small thing. So when you smell something, it immediately invokes memories. In traditional India, they used to say, make the person smell a shoe when the person is having epileptic seizure, right? There was some truth to it, because olfactory lobe, right, which is right above our noses, bypasses thalamus. Thalamus is a midbrain structure where all the sensory inputs go and then go to forebrain, right? Then go to the higher brain structure. But olfaction is unique. It's bypassing that, straight away going to various regions, including temporal lobe, amygdala, hippocampus. So in temporal lobe, synchronization accounts for 70% cases of epilepsy. Imagine, without providing general anesthesia, putting a small probe in the nose, having a prediction system, and breaking the seizure. Something we've been able to raise $23 million. We'll be setting it up in West Coast. We hope to raise twice as much amount more, working in sync with few companies. But this involved not just AI, this involved a lot of neuroscience, something in a way that sort of bringing my PhD background in both the sides and merging it together. But that's sort of a high-end example. I'll give you a very low-end example. Something that I'm actively doing in India, and I plan to continue doing in India, even if I move to US in a year or two, is a very low-tech example. Imagine kids in India who are facing the prospect of being labeled as inattentive. Teachers even being rude to the point that they may say this kid is dumb, right? Happens in small schools even now. When I was a kid, it used to happen in every school, right? So what is the case that if a kid has dyslexia or dyscalculia, right? Parents don't even know it until it's an extreme case. So imagine simply building a small platform using existing libraries, nothing fancy, putting together around 40 tools, because no simple psychology website puts it in one place, paying the right royalty, not doing the bad way jugaad. India is famous for its jugaad. Some of it is great innovation, some of it is bad. So not using the bad jugaad of stealing something, giving people the due royalty of some of these tests which are available, and recreating tests which are copyright free, putting them in one platform. So it's not a high-tech thing. Imagine something that takes just few lakh rupees of investment. Now, after that, having a base of teachers who are special educators. So you diagnose people's problems, and you tell those kids that they should be referred to this person in this city. So based on the city you're at, right? So your entrepreneurship need not be the highest tech. I gave you a very high-tech example, and I gave you an example of something that we are building. In fact, some of you are invited to come and discuss with me. Any one of you is invited to come and discuss with me. I'm expanding my team for that, right? This is something we hope we'll accomplish in less than 1 crore. Before the marketing part, there will come the marketing part, where I'm sure I'll end up spending 30 or 40 crores. But the product part would be less than 1 crore. That's my target, right? So the AI product need not be something where you need to actually reach out to investors, right? AI can be something that people can do from their savings. At least I'm doing this one simply from my savings rather than reaching out to investors. So point is, you can help transform society through entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship can be for education. Now, can this entrepreneurship be merged with education? I'll tell you not just the positives, even negatives of it. So I came back to India in 2014, had until now rather mixed experience as far as academia is concerned. I'll not say more than that, but I realized the kind of innovation I could do in the US, a lot less can be done here. And not necessarily because of facilities, they are obviously limiting, but because of the mindset of people who are administrators above you. But what I started doing out of lack of resources, I was always passionate about citizen science and training people in masses, I guess, had a lot of faith in democracy. I would simply not lie to you that it's not shaken. It is shaken to some extent, but I still continue to work from my lessons on the positives of it. So in Austin, I just took in 9 months, there's 70 kids. They were not working on AI, they were working on a biological experiment. And my boss told me this is stupidity, right? Because you can only get 1 person, 2 people you can supervise. So something I realized, I'm good in delegating tasks. So let me try it out without ever having an MBA in my life. But can I actually manage and find a person who can manage others, right? Sometimes it's worked, sometimes people have abused the privilege. So can I set up structures where I could do, let's say, drug discovery really fast? The expectation was finishing 1 project with highly talented PhD. We finished 9 projects with undergrads. So that past background gave me a confidence that let's try out the same experiment in data science in India. So let me start with the negatives of it. I have a bad habit. I start with bad news always, and then I like to finish with the good news. So quite the opposite of marketing approach, but I hope you get used to that. So the thing is, when you ask people, let's say through portals like Internshala or whatever, to get interns who will work long distance, you get things written in small caps, Facebook messages, all those things. You realize everyone, if you reject people's application, which I never encountered in US, you get even people to argue with you. So after a while, you have to develop a thick skin. So there are dangers of doing sort of citizen science, reaching out to people. And people expect a certificate, whether it's worth anything or not, right? And the most common thing I encountered while doing citizen science is plagiarism. So there is jugaad in any assignment. End of the day, you spend more time figuring out from where somebody has copied something, right? So those are the dangers of that. But what we have also done, I'll tell you 2 crazy things, right? We have a lot more success stories also, and that's why I continue to dabble with this model. And I've realized that now I give original problems. Instead of saying, here's a data set, I simply say, find a data set like this, take this approach, give me a solution. So if there are 400 people who have applied to me, in the end, I'll only get 3 assignments. So my job as a selector becomes very easy, right? So put a very high threshold, where obviously, I have to confess myself, I'm failing because I'm not spending a lot of time mentoring. But whatever resources I have, I'm basically taking the best of the best, right, by giving a tough statement. So what is needed for citizen science, I'll come to in a moment. What has to be done at a mass scale, which is beyond me as an individual. But as an individual, I do that now. Out of all my lessons of dealing with people's plagiarism, dealing with people lying to you and all that, but there are positives. The positives are amazing. I'll tell you, one student of mine, Ishan Goyal, and I hardly did anything in the project. He found out an alternative way to find correlation or association among things. He said, we have something which works 3-4 times better than the standard Pearson correlation coefficient, uses some aspects of heavy computation, doesn't detect any false negatives. Imagine finding association is one of the basic pillars of almost all science. And the guy has been able to do that. So you find gems. You find these talents, right? India has also a lot of Einsteins just sitting, sometimes even doing very boring corporate jobs, sometimes breaking their heads in startups, more often than not, being told in their university to do what everyone else is doing. So citizen science makes you meet such people. I'll give you another example of something that another student, Harshit, is doing. I had this crazy idea while peeling a peel of the orange, right? I said, can you have this jagged surface on the orange identical in 2, right? So even if I distort the peel, throw it just by using not the shape, Because now the orange doesn't have an identity. Let's say I flatten it out, I do something. But if I use simply the peel, right, stochastic fluctuations, I can say where the thing came from. It's like fingerprinting. Why has nobody used data fingerprinting? So crazy idea of finding association, finding anomaly, finding the directionality of data, which becomes very important not just for terrorism, which is an obvious implication. It becomes very important for even stock market prediction. We are hoping it'll be key one day for me to rise from few millions to $1 billion industry, right? I'm hoping that I'll be one of the big guys on NASDAQ, right? I'll be the big guy on Wall Street. But we'll see whether that journey happens or not, but there's already a lot of joy as a basic researcher also, which I continue to be, of finding a new approach. And it was done all through citizen science. So we've taken a rookie approach of citizen science by putting out advertisements, often with challenging assignments, and finding talent here and there. And this talent is not just coming from people from IITs. Obviously, there are top engineering colleges where I had the most pleasant experience, but it's not always the case. In fact, one guy from IIT Guwahati stole an entire paper and gave it to me, and I was still having some impression of brand name after coming back from US after a few decades, more than a decade, to India, and I assumed it's correct. Fortunately, before submitting it to journal, there was plagiarism check that I conducted just as a formality, realized everything was stolen. So it's not always the case that you get good quality just based on names, but good institutions. But I also had people, women trying to go back to professional life after having, let's say, a family leave for 10 years. So I had certain good experiences. So this is a sort of a crazy dice throw, the citizen science approach, where you're simply saying you work long distance and let us see what you've got. But this has also resulted in one such case of actually developing even a business partnership. Somebody came as a student, I realized is incredible at analytics. So this is an interesting model, but can it be sustainable? I'm gone in a year, there are probably 4 or 5 people like me in India only who are doing this crazy model of just putting things online and saying, hey guys, come work for me, we'll publish stuff together. I'm not paying you anything, you're not supposed to even meet me, there's at least no need to meet me, let's solve this problem together, right? So we have come up with a lot of things which have been talked about a lot. What is not being talked about is for one such candidate that I'm choosing, there are at least 500 I'm rejecting, and for the 5 that I chose, only 1 is going to the next stage. So obviously there is a very small, there is a funnel, it's a rather sharp funnel, but what is really needed is for government of India and private universities to open such a model, because what is missing in education? Let me ask this question. Even if you go to courses which offer artificial intelligence, they're offering courses, right? You might feel somewhat impressed by the number of degrees I have or the academic credentials, but let me tell you, I was a pretty poor student until I went to UT Austin. I have had marks fluctuating from 65% to even 98% in school, depending on what incentive my dad gave me to study. If there was no incentive, I was a 65% student. 10th, he gave me an incentive, okay, 1 month I'll do this, so ended up scoring 98%, not a big deal, but I was never a disciplined student. I was more interested in beating kids after class 8. Bigger in size, now become not just bigger, fatter in size. Doesn't help now, but it helped. I was mostly involved in fights rather than studying, right? So the fact is, coming back to this, that we need, right? If you step back and say, what kind of talent lies outside? Can we do something? Because I became a good student when I got to do what I really liked. I solved real world problems. For you, a lot of it might not even be real world problem. I solved this. If you click, the difference of arrival of sound across your 2 ears is less than a millisecond. Your brain works largely in 100 millisecond or tens of millisecond time frame. So how can brain compute in microseconds? That's what led me even to mathematics. So masochistic pursuit of not initially doing biology and then even doing mathematics, but it was a real world problem, and I was like, I'm going to crack it, right? And there was a joy in solving it. What universities are doing wrong is they're still teaching courses, not real world problem, not saying when you enter day 1, give somebody, say that it's your BTech, MTech, and an MBA combined course, right? It's a bloody 6-year thing. Pick up a problem and learn every single tool around it. Every damn university, overpriced university, is doing it wrong. Right? I'm hoping eventually that this is a vision I shared with some people in Valley also, in Silicon Valley also, that India is an amazing place, not just because I want to do something for the country I was born in, because it's an immense market, you'll make a lot of profit. Let's set up next generation universities. Something, it's not just a hypothetical dream, something because I'm a bit of a realistic person, that I know what my cash situation is, that I want to set out few biology projects and few edutech products right now. If I try setting up universities with my budget, I'll end up failing in everything. So it's just a dream postponed. It's just a dream deferred. It's not a dream which is given away. I'm working on it in my back sort of all the time, and sort of most of the time when I'm going to US, this is something what I'm doing networking for, that eventually let's set up more universities which will help create better people, better engineers, and maybe even find the Einsteins of AI revolution, right? So that is one of the dreams sort of I have, but I feel this is such a big task, right? Just because I have a dream, I'm trying to even sell myself. We are all trying to sell ourselves. Even as a kid, we are trying to sell a father or mother to get us some treat, right? So, I'm trying to sell you on my ideas, my vision, my products, and even trying to push you into the direction of thinking that I'm doing something great. But the point is, there's enough scope for a lot of people. So I'm not just simply trying to say, hey, wait for me to set up the next generation university. What are so many universities doing here? I would actually like to say, it's a sorry picture. Despite hefty fees, I'm not really happy with any single one of them, because I see people come to me after these universities and they suck at data science, they suck at artificial intelligence. They know how to just pull few libraries here and there. You ask them a tough problem, they fail, right? So we are not creating people for the next revolution. We need to create people for the next AI revolution, and not just from the privileged strata, not just from the cream of cream, right? Even in India, if it's just you're saying such a large population and you're just harnessing 1% talent, you're ignoring the 99%, right? You're ignoring people from villages, you're ignoring urban poor, you're ignoring women, right? So what happens? You're not able to harness that talent. So I think a policy change is required. I think every one of us needs to work towards that education goal. Anyway, I hope some of you would do similar things as I'm doing. I also hope some of you would do things better than I'm doing. I feel I'm being marginally successful. I hope some of you are stellarly successful in these kind of adventures, right? And I'm not just simply trying to appeal to your good morals. I'm trying to appeal to your pocket. I'm trying to appeal to your profit. One of the most important things is people want to educate their kids. Adults want to retrain themselves so they remain relevant for corporate jobs. So corporate reskilling is part of extended this thing. So one of the things that I mentioned to you about education, imagine even setting up AI-based tutors, nothing fancy, face recognition technology in your classroom, which is detecting your emotions, right? Who's browsing your cell phone, who's looking at you, who's excited, who's not excited, when somebody lost train of thought, right? So the teacher points out, hey, Ashish, maybe you need to pay attention, this, that, right? Maybe even a manual for AI assisting a teacher in pointing out, not just simply saying this is right or wrong. So that's sort of my vision. I'll leave you with that, and I'll entertain any questions you have.
Hi, Sukant.
Hi.
That's a nice talk. Basically, we are all conversant about bioinformatics and biotechnology, although biotechnology is taught in some IITs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, IIIT Delhi has launched a new course on biology with computer science.
Okay.
So there is some topics like genetics and molecular biology. So can you put some insight how AI will be incorporated in genetics and molecular biology?
AI is already helping in genetics quite a bit. I'll give you some examples that predicting things like even acute myeloid leukemia, right? Genetic basis, even the most recent study, not even cancer. If you look at the genes we share in autism and schizophrenia, something any biologist would have ruled out. Psychologically, autism is one end of spectrum and schizophrenia is another end of spectrum. And had it not been for massive AI along with such large databases, public access to them, we wouldn't have found out that more than 80% of the genes are similar. It's the combinatorics which is determining the final phenotype, right? And that combinatorics determines the area of expression. So same genes gone wrong can give rise to one extreme autism if it is in one brain region. If it is basically expressed in another, which results, let's take example of schizophrenia and autism, which I said. So in schizophrenia, you have more corticocortical loops, less inputs from thalamus. So in that case, just a hyperactivity of Wnt, sonic hedgehog, these kind of genes in cortex, right? And hypoactivity of Notch and other genes in thalamus. while the same thing goes opposite in autism would give you the same phenotype. So the nuts and bolts being similar for certain diseases, you won't have found out. There's another thing, not just genetics. I'll give you an example of people I'm honestly envious of. Schrödinger, a New York-based company which has crossed $6 billion. It's entirely, what it's doing is telling you which possible molecules bind to a particular receptor better. And they're reducing cost of drug discovery by already in silico giving you 15%, top 15% hits. So it's reducing your cost by 85%. And when I look at them, I feel that we can do a lot better. So AI is going to change things, but the problem what is there in curriculum is that people who know biology don't know AI.
Right. To add on that, a lot of research work is dying on neuroscience in the field of AI. And you also know that Google algorithm is coming up. For detection of skin cancer and predicting whether a person will suffer a cardiac attack by seeing his or her eyes. Now, in the near future, what do you think that radiology should be an AI expert?
There are, I think, so we abandoned a brief project because of lack of adequate data, but even our personal insights was that we can do better than a physician. And not just my insights, there's a good friend of mine, Mark Harnett, there are actually 2, 3, even Josh Gittleman, so my ex-classmates and my, like people who were senior to me, they were doing postdoc when I was doing PhD, they have come up with algorithms which are already commercially available, which are doing better than a physician. So I'm not suggesting a substitution that, okay, let's take MBBS people and throw them out of the window, they are no longer required. But the point is, AI can help you make a better physician, just like AI can help make a better student and a better teacher. The goal of, I think, AI, which I said in the beginning of the talk, that it's entwined. It's not an add-on. This emerging technology revolution would get entwined in our lives. And call me crazy, I even think maybe not my generation, the next generation would even see lifespans of 200 years or something, right?
Okay. Thanks a lot.